If you like fried pork chops and you've never had Japanese tonkatsu pork, you will be amazed by how incredibly delicious this is. They took the classic American breaded pork chop and made it better than anything you can imagine. Unfortunately, many restaurants these days, and nearly all home cooks, use a bottled tonkatsu sauce, which is little more than Worcestershire, sugar, and cornstarch. But that's not why this dish became an overnight sensation. Here's the real sauce made from scratch and some tips on how to prepare the pork professionally.
Assembling the principal ingredients as usual. I've got an apple. I'm going to peel this and core it into a hot pan. I'm going to add about an ounce of vegetable oil and the apple. And about a teaspoon of salt. 120 grams of apples. After they start to soften, I'm going to add about 90 grams of mushrooms. And a few more minutes go by. I'm going to add the tomatoes and garlic. 90 grams of tomatoes and 1 clove of garlic. As this cooks, I'm going to turn the heat down just a little bit. I'm also going to add that 15 milliliters of rice wine vinegar in here. Now the heat's down to 5 on 1 to 10. We're going to cook this slowly to meld all the ingredients. After somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes, depending on the heat, you see it starts to be like this. That's the advantage of a video. This would be hard to explain in a book. Now I'm going to add 90 milliliters of water. And stirring it around a little bit. I'm going to get it up to a simmer, and then I'm just going to let it cool off and puree it. It's going to simmer for 2 or 3 minutes. Puree it. And then this has to be passed through a sieve, rubbed through a sieve. And once it's through the sieve, I'm using Lee & Perrins Worcestershire sauce. I'm adding a tablespoon of that. If you want, you can also use something called Chinese black vinegar. It's similar, but it's not exactly the same. And I suspect that Chinese black vinegar is probably more authentic, but this works very well too, and it's certainly a lot easier to get than black vinegar. It's a very easy sauce to make. Now from here, you have to adjust it to your own personal tastes. Some people like it a little sweeter, so they add a little sugar to it. I don't. I like it exactly this way. You just bottle it up and put it in the fridge and you're ready to go. When it comes to actually pounding the pork, this is your typical thinly cut pork chop. In a restaurant, what we're going to do in order to make it more pleasant for the customer is we're going to go around and we're going to trim this, and this will probably end up going into sausage or some other kind of ground meat application, because there's a lot of nice fat and gelatinous tissue in here. It's going to be really tasty, but in this application it's going to be kind of tough and stringy in this part. And the same thing about this band that goes around the edge. You know, you don't have to be super careful about it, but you want to get rid of a little bit of this, because it'll also be tough and stringy at the edge. So now you're left with this piece. If you see anything else that catches your eye as being stringy, just get rid of it. You're gonna have plenty of pork anyway, and then this is all for sausage. When it comes time to actually pound the meat, of course, put it between a couple of layers of plastic wrap as usual. And now there's different kinds of mallets you can use. The one that has the textured side is good, generally speaking, but on a piece of meat that starts out this thin, you have a very high probability of tearing it. So a larger surface, something like this is much better for it. And of course the other big trick is not to try to do it all in one massive stroke. Be patient. Work it gently around the edges. When you have it the thickness that you want it, put a little salt on it now. This will help in the long run. And we've got just another couple little tricks here. In the egg that you're going to dip this in, I add a little bit of that tonkatsu sauce. This helps perfume the entire dish with it, even before you dip it into the sauce, so you add the sauce to it. And the only other trick that I can suggest is to add a healthy amount of cornstarch to the flour you're going to dip this in. This will not only keep the breading stuck to the pork chop better than plain flour alone, but it'll also make it lighter than the typical American breaded pork chop that's like really thick, heavy bread. It'll give it a little bit more lighter flavor. And of course you want to use panko breadcrumbs if you can get them.
Also look for my cocktail book, Cocktails of the South Pacific and Beyond, Advanced Mixology, available through Amazon online.